What if everything you thought made you smart was actually what's keeping you stuck? Stay with me to the end, because what you're about to discover may completely change how you see yourself and the people around you. You can't fill a cup that's already full. That's the phrase that kept echoing in my head as I watched a man I once mentored spiral into another crisis of his own making. Bright, articulate, confident, yet completely unteachable. And that's the thing about the illusion of knowing. It's seductive. It gives you a false sense of certainty that makes growth impossible. We've all met this type. Maybe we've even been him. The man who argues passionately about things he barely understands, who mocks new perspectives without ever exploring them, who confuses stubbornness for strength. He doesn't just believe he knows everything. He believes questioning himself is a form of weakness. Psychologists have a name for this: the Dunning-Kruger effect. A well-documented cognitive bias that reveals how those with the least competence often overestimate their abilities the most. It's not that they're malicious. It's that their lack of knowledge blinds them to their lack of knowledge. But let's bring this down to earth. I once worked with a client, let's call him David. Early 30s, ran a mid-sized tech firm, sharp as hell, or so he thought. He constantly clashed with his leadership team, rejected input, dismissed ideas. He wasn't growing, and neither was the company. After a brutal quarter, he came to me exasperated. Why can't I find good people? I asked him a question he couldn't answer. What might you be wrong about? Silence. See, wisdom doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from realizing how little you truly know. Socrates nailed it centuries ago. I know that I know nothing. The wisest people are always the most curious. They ask questions not to look smart, but because they know answers are earned, not assumed. In contrast, the foolish man protects his ego at all costs. He argues louder when he's unsure. He scoffs at feedback. He views learning as an attack on his identity, and in doing so, he creates an invisible ceiling above his life. No matter how much talent or potential he has, he can't rise above it because he won't let himself evolve. What's even more dangerous is how this mentality seeps into every area of life: relationships, business, even health. The man who already knows why his relationship failed without ever asking what he might have contributed. The guy who knows how to invest but never studies finance. The one who understands women but can't maintain a healthy relationship. This isn't just arrogance, it's fear. Because to admit you don't know is to admit you're not in control. And for many men, that's terrifying. So what's the way out? It starts with a brutally honest self-audit. Ask yourself, when was the last time I genuinely changed my mind about something important? When was the last time I sought out information that challenged me instead of validated me? Who do I allow to question me, and do I actually listen? Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less often. It's choosing growth over comfort, questions over certainty, curiosity over ego. Because the man who never doubts himself is the man who will never truly know himself. And that blindness has a ripple effect. There's a pattern I've seen over and over in my years as a psychologist. Men who never move forward because they've chained themselves to a narrative where they're always the victim. Not sometimes. Not situationally. Always. You can hear it in their language. The system is against me. No one ever gave me a chance. She ruined my life. It sounds tragic on the surface, even sympathetic. But when you peel it back, there's something far more dangerous going on. The refusal to take responsibility, not just for one mistake, but for their entire lives. And here's what most people miss. This kind of blame isn't passive. It's an active choice. Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. I can't think of a better description for what this behavior looks like in real time. And it's not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, victimhood wears a quiet mask. It sounds like apathy, procrastination, deflection. It shows up when a man spends more time talking about how unfair life is than doing anything to improve it. It shows up when he blames his ex, his boss, or society for everything going wrong, never once asking, what part did I play in this? The psychological term for this is external locus of control, the belief that life is happening to you, not because of you. It's one of the fastest ways to lose power, potential, and peace of mind. Let me tell you about Marcus. Brilliant guy, creative, charismatic. But every time we talked, his sentences started with, if only. If only I had better parents. If only my teachers had believed in me. If only I got lucky like other people. I asked him once, okay, let's say all that's true. Now what? He had no idea, because victimhood doesn't require a plan, just a story. And that's the danger. Victimhood offers identity without accountability. It gives you a script to follow, but no tools to rewrite the ending. It makes you feel momentarily justified and permanently stuck. Meanwhile, life keeps moving, opportunities pass, relationships fray, and then the man clinging to his excuses starts to wonder why he's being left behind. But the shift can happen, and it starts with one decision: stop blaming and start building. Because responsibility isn't about guilt, it's about power. The moment you say, this is mine to change, is the moment you become powerful again. And that doesn't mean every failure is your fault, but it means every transformation is your responsibility. There's something radical about saying, no one's coming to save me, and I'm okay with that. That's where growth starts. That's where confidence is born. Because when you own your story, you can write a new one. And in that moment, you stop being a prisoner of your past and become the author of your future. Sometimes the real war isn't out there, it's inside. A constant battle between our impulses and our principles. I've met CEOs who collapse under pressure, artists who burn bridges over a single emotional outburst, fathers who sabotage their children's trust because they never learned how to sit with discomfort. Different stories, but the same root: emotional immaturity. A man who can't master his emotions will be ruled by them. He won't lead his life, he'll chase it. Reacting, exploding, retreating, always at the mercy of whatever he's feeling in the moment. You know what that looks like. The man who turns a disagreement into a shouting match. The one who ghosts after one bad date. The guy who quits a job because his boss gave him constructive feedback. He doesn't respond, he reacts. Carl Jung spoke often about the unconscious forces that shape our actions. The parts of ourselves we refuse to face, anger, insecurity, shame, don't go away. They go underground, and from there, they run the show. One of the greatest myths we've been sold is that real men don't feel. But the truth is, real men feel everything. They just don't let those feelings control them. Emotional control isn't suppression, it's self-awareness in action. I worked with a man named Elias, a former Marine, now entrepreneur. By all appearances, he was disciplined, but inside, he was constantly triggered by slow drivers, tough clients, even his own kids. He told me, I don't want to be this angry all the time. We didn't start with tactics. We started with truth. Where did the anger come from? What was it protecting? What patterns was he repeating from childhood? Once we connected the dots, everything began to change. That's the power of emotional intelligence. It's not about becoming soft. It's about becoming stable, being the calm in the chaos, not the cause of it. Because a man who can't regulate his emotions is a man who can be manipulated by anyone who knows how to push his buttons, and the world is full of button pushers. The wise man doesn't flinch, he doesn't run, he pauses, breathes, and chooses, and in that choice, he becomes unshakable. There's a saying that's floated through motivational circles for years: show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. But that's not just a catchy quote, it's a principle rooted in psychology. Human beings are wired to adapt to their surroundings. Mirror neurons in the brain literally tune us to the emotions, language, and energy of the people around us. You may think you're immune to influence, but spend enough time around complainers, excuse makers, or unmotivated people, and you'll start to sound like them. The foolish man doesn't just have the wrong crowd, he defends it. He tells himself they're loyal, that they get him, that he's better than them, even while staying stuck with them. Why? Because being the smartest person in a weak circle feels safer than being the weakest in a strong one. I once asked a client who was struggling to make progress, who challenges you? He paused and said, honestly, no one. Everyone just agrees with me. That wasn't a brag. That was a warning. Growth happens in tension. It happens in spaces where you're called out and called up. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Smart men choose discomfort on purpose. They look for mentors who intimidate them a little, friends who ask hard questions, circles where their excuses don't hold up. Because they understand something most men never do. Comfort is seductive, but it's also corrosive. So here's the real question. If you looked at the 5 people you spend the most time with, what story does it tell about your future? Because environment isn't just where you are, it's who you're becoming. There's a quiet addiction gripping millions of men, and it's not what you think. It's not heroin or gambling or even alcohol. It's comfort, it's distraction, it's short-term pleasure in exchange for long-term purpose. This is the dopamine era, where scrolling replaces striving, porn replaces intimacy, and the fantasy of success replaces the discipline required to earn it. And the most dangerous part? It all feels good until it doesn't. Carl Jung believed that within every man lies a battle between his higher self, the disciplined, purposeful, evolving self, and his lower self, the one driven by impulse, laziness, and fear. And every time a man chooses what's easy over what's meaningful, he's letting his lower self win. There's nothing inherently wrong with pleasure, but when it becomes your compass, you lose your direction. Because pleasure doesn't lead, it distracts. You wake up one day and realize you've built a life out of numbing agents. Fast food for stress, apps for loneliness, Netflix for ambition. Your goals become fantasies. Your body grows weaker, your mind dulls, your confidence shrinks. I had a client, fit, charismatic, talented, but every night he lost hours to video games, junk food, and porn. His mornings were foggy, his relationships shallow, his goals constantly delayed. I just need to get motivated, he said. But what he needed wasn't motivation, it was detox. Dopamine detox, specifically. A conscious effort to reclaim your focus by removing artificial pleasure. No scrolling, no porn, no processed sugar, no passive entertainment. Just presence, boredom, real work. That's where the fire gets reignited, because when you stop flooding your system with fake rewards, your brain starts craving real ones. The satisfaction of a completed workout, the intimacy of a real relationship, the quiet pride of staying focused when your mind begged you to drift. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. The freedom to live a life you respect. The freedom to look in the mirror and know you're becoming someone solid. Because a foolish man devours all he has, but a wise man builds, slowly, daily, without shortcuts. And that's the ultimate pleasure, living with purpose. There's a quiet addiction gripping millions of men, and it's not what you think. It's not heroin or gambling or even alcohol. It's comfort. It's distraction. It's short-term pleasure in exchange for long-term purpose. This is the dopamine era, where scrolling replaces striving, porn replaces intimacy, and the fantasy of success replaces the discipline required to earn it. And the most dangerous part? It all feels good until it doesn't. Carl Jung believed that within every man lies a battle between his higher self, the disciplined, purposeful, evolving self, and his lower self, the one driven by impulse, laziness, and fear. And every time a man chooses what's easy over what's meaningful, he's letting his lower self win. There's nothing inherently wrong with pleasure, but when it becomes your compass, you lose your direction. Because pleasure doesn't lead, it distracts. You wake up one day and realize you've built a life out of numbing agents. Fast food for stress, apps for loneliness, Netflix for ambition. Your goals become fantasies. Your body grows weaker. Your mind dulls. Your confidence shrinks. I had a client, fit, charismatic, talented, but every night he lost hours to video games, junk food, and porn. His mornings were foggy, his relationships shallow, his goals constantly delayed. I just need to get motivated, he said. But what he needed wasn't motivation, it was detox. Dopamine detox, specifically. A conscious effort to reclaim your focus by removing artificial pleasure. No scrolling, no porn, no processed sugar, no passive entertainment, just presence, boredom, real work. That's where the fire gets reignited. Because when you stop flooding your system with fake rewards, your brain starts craving real ones. The satisfaction of a completed workout, the intimacy of a real relationship, the quiet pride of staying focused when your mind begged you to drift. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. The freedom to live a life you respect. The freedom to look in the mirror and know you're becoming someone solid. Because a foolish man devours all he has, but a wise man builds, slowly, daily, without shortcuts. And that's the ultimate pleasure, living with purpose.